lag because I was lagging yesterday, like bad. Yeah, I was sweating earlier. I got tired of it. It's like the sweatiest of the sweatiest be at the end.
Yeah.
It's
And then
hot.
you got the people who just be sitting there fucking camping the storm.
Yes, they be in the bush.
I'm already knowing. Yeah, I'm already knowing what we about to get into.
Ay, ay, ay.
Let me put my truck on.
Okay, hopefully the stream don't be laggy. Oh, Trey.
So what, you play on a PC?
Yeah, well, I'm playing controller because I used to play on Xbox, but so I connected
Would
my
you say PC is better than console?
yeah for FPS reasons.
Understandably.
Like it's a lot smoother. And I do a lot of stuff on my computer anyway, so might
So
as
it just
well.
makes sense to get one. Yeah. How much does your setup cost, if you don't mind me asking?
Ooh, I got it like 6 years ago, so
A
everything
lot
was
cheaper than it would be
yeah,
today. I hear you. I hear you.
probably like everything cost me like 1,200.
That's not bad.
Yeah, but now a good gaming PC costs around well like 2,000.
25.
Yeah,
Yeah.
my coworker he got a PC, it was 3 grand. I'm like, damn.
Yeah, I was about to say my friend bought his PC for 5,
Shit.
but he fully built all his parts. So
Yeah, he got the good piece. Gosh, not my fault. I didn't get to say hi to chat. What's up, Trey? We added a new XP bar thing where you can like type and you rank up, so that's what we got going. Oh shit, there's people on me already. I can't tell if they're real.
well, you running? Oh yeah, they running. Don't run for me.
Get them.
Yeah, I'm not chasing that.
I'm lagging? No, every time I stream,
Actually, hold up.
I lag. No. My internet has been poop lately. Can I get up there? Oh. Wait, are you chasing? I can go with you? Oh yeah, he's chasing.
Uh,
Bring him back. Bring
yes.
him back. Bring him back. Where they at?
That was one.
Oh,
Alright, there was some bots. But we'll take this gun.
if you type exclamation point my profile, you'll be able to see how many XP you have. I think I'm the only one that's not able, and the bots are the only ones that are not able to get XP. That would be cheating. Oh, there's people pulling up. Um,
There you go. Trying to charge my shield real quick.
oh shit. Where you going? Got her ass. She was, I think that's a real person because they were doing all that jumping.
Well, so that means their teammate might be somewhere in the
Like
bar.
running and jumping. I don't know if bots do that.
Yes. There were some people that landed in the same town as us. Because we haven't ran into them yet. Oh, never mind. Hup. Oh, you guys are shooting at me. How cute. Oh, I'm out of ammo.
Oh, there's people coming.
Thank you.
Behind me.
One more person.
Real people. You, I'm gonna try to.
Got him low.
He's on my ass. Oh yeah. Got him. What? You think you could run away from me right now? I think you play marbles? Shit.
Unfortunately, this new season has not been
No.
kind at all. I'm not really the biggest fan of it right now.
I haven't updated, so I wouldn't know.
It's something. Let me tell you.
Yeah, cause I think like I only get on to play ranked to rank up on stream and then that's it. Like to see how
Yeah,
far.
I would say that's
Where's that?
typically all I play on there anyway. But
Oh,
it's a matter of literally just the people on there just be so ass.
extraction.
Or bad, I should say.
Somebody's on extraction. Let's go.
I'm on my way.
Yeah, whatever. He got. Oh, he's right here. How did that? What you thought? I'm taking your shit.
Somebody else on there? Are you low?
White.
He's somewhere in this bush. God damn
Oh hell no. There's somebody else.
it. Somebody else is here, but I'm not worried about that right now. This motherfucker low. I can't let him slide.
How did that? Woo! Somebody else is coming. I'm all kind of like
You good?
what is it called? Flank, distract them, I guess. Woo! They're low. Up here. Shoot.
Oh, I'm seeing there's one on top of the hill.
I see a guy.
God dang.
Alright. Oh, come get your partner, buddy. He's in the bush. In that bush right here. You think I'll see you? I'm on PC, brother. I'm pushing him. I missed. He's in that bush though. Crack. One shot. Oh! Damn it! They couldn't get it off. He went down, didn't he?
I'm not even seeing him over here. That boy got loose.
He went in the tunnel. He had to. Well, guess what? We're taking the battle bus.
I'm coming.
Ugly horn. Oh shoot. Oh. Do we run into that?
I don't see what I'm not.
Yeah, I usually play with people who like getting sprites and stuff. So we usually just
But say,
play.
when I'm on here, I'm usually by myself, so.
Oh, shit. I don't know, these are people.
Heck yeah.
Yeah. I usually like playing duos or like squads with my friends. Cause I don't like streaming by myself.
No, I definitely get you on that.
Yeah.
But like the commentary ends up being quite redundant.
Yeah, if nobody's chatting back. They just come
Yeah,
in, say hi, and then dip out.
that's about it.
Doing their own thing. Which is cool. I ain't tripping.
Hmm.
Alright.
Where should we? Oh,
Let's go. Where they at? There's nobody around.
it's a big old circle. There's only 14 other people.
Wow.
I'm thinking maybe down this way.
Okay, yeah, we can go. Whee! Have you played with anybody else on Threads?
Mm-mm.
No. I feel like
No.
Threads. I don't know. I've been trying to find like a lot of like gamer girls to play with. I just feel like they're too shy to.
To speak.
Yeah, or like even like yeah, like I'll play and then they'll add you and then they like forget.
And that'll be the last thing you hear from them. Hey, yeah.
Not me. I love playing. I swear. Well, whenever I have the chance, I just don't like the guys that are like, "Oh no, you need to play with me." Like, are you on now? I want to play with you. Are you on now? And it's just like, bro, I have a life.
Hey, yeah. Yeah, see. I don't know about. That's crazy.
Is that somebody on top?
Bye-bye, duck.
Oh yeah, I should probably run, girl. Like maxed out. We go up.
Yeah, high ground's usually a good idea.
Sorry, there's somebody in front of me. Sorry. They're running for their lives. They're in here. They're in here. They're in here.
Shoot. Oh, right there.
White. There's two of them in there. They're going for that vault. Oh, shit, I thought I was gonna break the walls. There's two of them. Be careful. Hack them for 103. I can't.
Good God. That is too tight to the corner. They're both low in there now. They're healing right now.
I knocked him.
In the corner, invisible. On top where you knocked him. Yeah.
Yeah. It's 9 o'clock.
Oh shit, we gotta go.
Yeah, we gotta go, but we're gonna take their sprites while we go. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes. Oh,
Dang, y'all left some loot for us.
wow.
So nice. Let me get that shotgun. Fire Sprite.
I'll get that
Oh, yeah.
Sprite. All right, now let's get out of here. There's some. All right, now we need to get you out of here. Woo-wee.
I got another med kit, and I got these boots, so.
Nice, I got that. Finally, I'm getting good clips. I've been having such a horrible Fortnite experience these past 2 weeks.
Why you said that?
Because, like, I'll get, like, 4th, 5th place when it's just, like, so... I don't know, I feel like it would be easy if people were not camping in bushes. What?
I mean, they're always gonna be camping in the bush.
What is that? Oh, there's somebody pushing up right here. Oh, shiz. Oh,
Let's
shit.
say there's a fight going on
We should
above
go
us.
to the extraction. I feel like
Alright.
play it safe. It's safe in there too. Are they shooting at you? Oh. Come on. Oh shoot.
Oh, perfect.
They're gonna come. They're like up here. And we gotta go all the way over here.
Ooh.
But we just cut that way. Right away.
So it should be a 2v1.
Hurry up, girl. The storm. Hurry. I don't know if I
I
should.
gotta make it, buddy.
Okay. I'm putting. Alright, I'm out. Alright.
Oh.
We're at. Keep pushing.
Sitting on top of a building. They coming.
Oh yeah, I'm where they at?
I made it out. Cool.
He's right here.
Shield up.
He's right here. Oh, cracked him. Ow, I'm dead. We need a trade. Fuck.
Oh. I wasn't expecting both of them.
Fuck, push back if you can.
I hope they don't notice how low I am.
They saw me. Fuck. I think it's a 2v2, right?
Right here real quick. Yeah.
19 seconds. Shit, we gotta push to them too. You don't have many that you could throw at me?
I got one.
Check that shit.
There you go. I got one. It ain't looking pretty right now.
They're gonna sit up there too, huh?
Mm-hmm. Ooh.
Where they at?
Behind that tree over there. And one's going around to the left more, so.
Ooh wee.
Yikes. Tuck my little booty down.
Fudge. What should we do? We gotta go to them.
Yeah, they're right behind this tree right there. Just be careful.
I'm gonna get on top of this building if I can. Inside this building. Where they at? Where they at? Where they at?
They're probably gonna be on top of something if I'm not mistaken. Come here.
Go, 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 quick, 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 quick. I'm taking height on this building. Oop.
Oh my god.
Sorry. Oh fuck!
Where
They're gonna
the fuck?
push. They're gonna
In a
push.
bush. I just get shot from a bush. Oh my god, yeah. Mm, mm.
Stupid.
Mm.
Damn it! You know how many
That's what
times
shot
I
was
hit
crazy.
them?
A lot. And I was trying to figure out how they lived through all of that dang turret damage you was doing.
Yes, exactly. Like what? That's great. You wanna return to lobby or
Nah, we
play
good.
again? Play again. All right. I'm gonna post that I'm live because I haven't done that yet.
You good. I'm gonna be right back.
All right. Wow. See, I'm telling you, I can never get. I gotta sweat my way all the way to. My phone's about to die too. Wow. That could have been my game. If I'm not
Nah, that's on
sweating,
me.
then we don't win. Like, that's what it feels like. I don't want to sweat. Or like, I don't know.
That's like the only way to win a game in this.
Yes, just sweat. Because everyone's bouncing off. Everybody's running away, bouncing off. I gotta chase people down. I don't feel like doing that. take it away, and I think it will be better.
This.
We have this.
This. Just gonna try to kill as many people as I can.
Yeah, and I'm gonna just be right behind you. So we can like assist each other and stuff.
Oh, my first victim. Hello, motherfucker. Victim number 2? You coming right to the plate?
Yeah, I was gonna take that from you. I was like, nah, let me not.
Look, if you did, I wouldn't even care. Means I ain't shooting fast enough.
It's like there's people that rage because I didn't take their kills. So I don't even try sometimes. I got half pot right here.
Oh yeah.
Then a king sprite.
That king sprite to stay where it's at.
Yeah, it's pickaxe damage.
I don't know. It ain't for me. I'm sure there's people out there that use it, but it just won't be me.
Oh, nice. Oh, extraction? Where's that at? Here? Oh, fuck. Somewhere over here. Let's go get him. Okay. Got one? Brother, no. You better not try to. Ah! Right here. Woo-hoo. Ow!
Hell yeah.
Did they extract the?
Yeah, I don't know what he extracted, but he extracted something.
Lucky. Okay. We're Sprite hunting the Sprite hunters. How about that? Ooh. He actually hit me though. I seen like another extraction go up somewhere over here.
Hey, yo. I don't even know how you're seeing that.
Right? There's an extraction over there? Yeah.
Okay.
Oh. Well, I have... Yeah, they're here. They're here.
Like, that's crazy.
Oh, yeah, they're real people. They're using smokes and whatnot. Yep. He's invisible right here. I can't... Oh, you're...
The shield's correct.
Fucking hell. There's somebody else here. Look, come over here. How about that? Stop being a wuss. Oh, I have a hunting rifle. Where you at?
Right here.
No, where is he at?
Oh,
he got my ass. Ah.
I got some smalls before you.
I'm gonna just act like I'm low. His friend is somewhere over here. Or he's making his way around. I don't know. Yeah.
I see.
He's there. Fuck! I might die right now.
Shield's gone on him.
I don't have no minis. Still nothing.
I threw some on the side of the building for you.
Oh, fuck, I landed in the trash. I went straight in the trash bin.
Here.
I'm scared, I'm scared. Where are they at?
Okay.
I don't see them no more.
Time for us to start moving now.
Yeah, let's go back. Ooh, that was a bad idea. This was a bad idea. Go back, right back where we came from. Oh, another extraction?
Whoa, 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 whoa.
Oh, they're pushing you, they're pushing you, they're pushing you.
Damn, this game was so...
Got him, got him, got him, got him. Bush,
Thank
bush,
you.
bush, bush. Okay. Damn, my aim sucks. Jair, you see his ass? Knocked his bush.
Hold on.
$96. Yeah, boy, you better. Back. He's cracked right here. He rifted. Ah, you. I'm going to the reboot. Because he's going to try to reboot him right now. Ooh. Oh, fuck, there's people here. Ah! Somebody here. He's on top, he's on top. I need help. Oh, where you at, where you at, where you at?
Knock one.
Good shit. Oh, fuck. No!
Knock two.
Oh, there's another one, there's another
Wait,
one.
huh?
What?
One of them got that thing.
He's on top of it. Yeah, ain't you? What? No, 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 where are you going? Where are you going? Get it out, get it out.
I reload. Almost killed him. Oh, damn it.
Let's go! You're not going nowhere. Ah, this is what you call sweating?
Let me go back to pick up old buddy Chub. I saw that on the floor.
Oh, peanut.
I want that and I need that.
Well, yeah, I need that too. You don't got a medi by any chance?
Actually, yeah, I'm gonna toss the charge right away. I got enough minis.
Oh gosh. Beautiful, beautiful. You can hold on to. You got peanut?
I have it, but I'll take it for now. I don't have anything on my back.
I think I might switch it out. Wow. We're actually
Go ahead, reload real quick.
dealing with sweaties right now. Like duos are like more real. Oh, really?
I'm tripping.
Ooh. Oh, they're coming. I don't know where the hell he's at, but he's somewhere over here. Got his ass. Is this the same guy from earlier? Bro.
All that damn rolling around. I am.
Oh my days.
I don't want that burnt peanut like that.
All right.
Yes.
High ground. Something? I know his friend went in here somewhere. Where would hold on, let me check the map real quick. I think zone's gonna end somewhere over here. Oh, there's somebody on the... Ooh, I missed. Oh my gosh. He's up here. Okay. Bye.
What's the shotgun?
Yeah, I don't think that.
Oh, I see them. They're on top of the building. Bye.
I think that. Ow. Leave me alone. Where is he at?
One on the bridge, one on top of the building.
Oh, okay, I see him.
I think they might both be on top of the building now.
Watch it, because that sniper is dangerous. There's somebody also on a reboot. Well, that's something. They're pushing, they're going left. Well, fuck it. Let's get out of here, this area right here.
That reboot van over there.
Okay.
Somebody's trying to reboot.
Yeah, for 91. There's a car as well, right here.
Are they trying to reboot, or are they just using that as a distraction?
Maybe. Alright. Oh wait, I can upgrade my guns real quick here. Oh girl. Oh wait, I don't. Yeah. There you go. That's all I need. I don't even care about the Sprite that much. I just use the dust to upgrade my guns. Oh fuck! Behind us? Get in the...
On top of the...
I'm going on the war things.
They're on top of the little mountain area.
This one?
I
No?
want to say yes, considering where we were.
No, I don't think so. No, I don't see anybody up here. We're gonna take it over. Let's go. There's people over here, though. Ooh wee. Oh boy. How am I not? How am I not hitting? I mean. I hope they get intervened so bad. You have sniper ammo by any chance?
They're extractor.
That's fine.
Or they're trying to bait people over there. Not really sure.
You have sniper ammo?
Do I have sniper ammo?
Yep.
Yes.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Because I missed a lot.
That's all good. That's what ammo's for. Oh my goodness.
Woo! You. They're right here. That team that was shooting at us earlier. 100. Woo! He hit me for 100.
Don't worry. Let's say try not to take too much damage because the other team's still aiming at us.
100. This guy right here. Oh fuck. Oh my god. What? 100?
Well, y'all aim some duke.
Babe is Dookie.
Oh, I ain't talking about you. I was damn near standing still and they was missing.
Alright, now we gotta go.
Good thing there's a jump pad.
Yeah, we go this.
Follow you.
We go this way. Oh, do you have a rift? Not a rift. Fort or whatever that thing is called.
No.
Alright, so we gotta get in a building. Or behind a rock. Fudge. Right, because it's over here. So we need to get behind, I feel like, this rock. Oh fuck, there's people on me.
Down, come down.
Fuck! Oh fuck! I'm down. Right here.
There's another team shooting at you
Fuck.
as well. Be careful.
I'm inside, I'm inside, I'm inside.
Thanks for the ride, gang.
I got 10 seconds. I got 10 seconds. Come on, beat their ass. Let's go. Let's go.
LOL. This is crazy. Oh, he trying to drive us into the storm. Get off.
Alright, we're good. We're good here. We're back at the same spot from...
Hmm?
He's right here in this corner. I need minis again.
I ain't got none. Oh, there's some
Shit.
down here.
Oh, there's people pushing.
Knocked one. One, two. So there's somebody up top here.
Somebody on me. Oh shit.
Oh my god. Where did you come from?
Yeah, I hit him 3 times. Alright.
No, get out of there. It's you and 3 other people. One of them is following you.
The fuck?
Hell yeah. No, it should be a 1v2 unless it's a 1v1v1. You win these though.
Haha. Oh no.
Let me check the group chat. Oh.
Okay, 1v1v1. Woo!
I'm trying to do good.
Yay!
Let's
go! I was like, why didn't he die? No, I have to go for it. Let's go,
I think we got
finally.
people joining it that want to join us.
Yes, that's what I'm talking about. Yes. Okay, let me add them. Let's go back to lobby.
Hey, do y'all have mic?
Yes.
Yes.
Oh, nice to meet you.
Okay, who's in?
What do we do?
Wait, I spelled it wrong. Am I tripping?
Oh, my baby daddy.
There
That looks like your dad. Okay. Your dad is a dog, so
we go.
that makes sense.
Dad, you
You-
ordered?
Let me add this other person.
I
It's
am.
dark.
There we go.
Sorry, my kid talked a lot.
It's okay.
He thinks he's funny.
Let's go. Full squad from Threads.
Is this
Probably
person
full
from Threads
squad.
too?
Yeah.
Cool. Nice to meet y'all.
Yeah.
Hello.
Where are y'all from?
I'm in Texas.
I'm in North
California.
Whoa, we're everywhere.
I'm in Utah.
We all,
The
we
ping?
all over the place.
Ping is gonna be crazy.
Ping is about to be ridiculous, but it's all good, yeah. It's all good.
So I have no life, and I leveled up literally every sprite that I have.
I know.
Oh,
We're sprite killers over here. We go for the extractions and just take him out.
Yeah. I like that. I do when I'm bored. I was like, I'm gonna take one of your sprites. You got any smokers here?
Nah, I don't smoke. I drink.
currently on a break.
Oh, I hear ya. Stopped smoking for a little bit because I caught bronchitis.
Yikes.
And
That'd be
it
the
was making it
worst.
worse. Yeah, it was.
Yeah.
I
had
was
a
sick
friend
for
who had
like a good month and a
bronchitis,
half.
but they did not stop smoking, and their bronchitis did not get any better.
Yeah, I had to. It was making it bad.
So where do you guys want to land?
Want to be risky and go to one of the blue
Here?
landing spots? Yeah, we can go there.
Right down.
I
Hell
love
yeah.
Calamari Canyon. Hell yeah.
Let's go. Wow. I don't
My kids hate it when I land there because they're like, we always die. I'm like, well, it's hot, but they have good loots over there.
Mhm.
We're just sweating right now. Oh my gosh, my neck is hurting so
You said you
bad.
won the last game?
Yeah,
Yeah.
Hell yeah.
full
She clutched
sweat.
up a 2v1.
Jesus. I got sniped from from low ground too.
I play with my kids. I don't really care about winning. I'm just like having fun with
Just
them.
having fun.
When I'm by
Yeah.
myself, I try hard.
I like the gold sprite.
I like the galaxy ones.
They're like more. They're rare. Ooh.
The gold ones?
The
My
galaxy one?
Linko, you got two people above you.
Oh
or one
shoot!
person, I'm not sure. They just
Yeah, I
dropped
see.
on
I
you.
got. I got it.
She got it.
I
On this,
knocked one.
on my way. Noise.
The team white. Thank
Nice.
you.
Oh, I'm lagging. Whoa.
I just recently got into Fortnite too because I usually play Call of Duty,
Oh.
but I was getting bored because it's always playing. I started playing
Fair.
Fortnite, and now I can't stop spending money on it.
Yeah.
That's the reason why I don't get off. I spend too much money on it.
I'm like, ooh, I need this skin, this one, and then I need this emote.
I try to limit myself to one skin per season because I know how I get.
Yeah, I get that honestly. I've been waiting for the one that I have now. This is the one I really, really wanted. And I was like, I'm not gonna spend any more.
Why you lie to yourself like that?
I don't know. I know myself better than that.
Okay, since you've mastered every sprite, what does the punk sprite actually do?
The punk sprite? It's supposed
Yeah.
to do something random. I've never really like paid attention to what it did. It's supposed
Okay.
to give out some kind of surprise.
'Cause it
Some
says it
kind
gives it
of
nothing.
surprise.
Or
Possibly
Gives nothing?
something, though.
oh, okay.
Yeah, it
But
says
possibly something infinitely.
yeah.
You know.
So I'm not really sure what it does, but I'm assuming it's cool.
Ooh, hunting rifle.
People-
I'm really
Uh-huh.
mad they took out the DMR.
Where you
Really?
going?
My favorite gun.
Oh. Uh, the real person.
Someone getting shot at?
Yeah, they're chasing.
Nah,
They're chasing.
I would say chasing.
I seen shots over here.
Chasing somebody.
Oh, that was this person had used a rift as I was shooting at them.
Oh, could have been.
I just see like a speck of dust in the sky.
You a big ball?
They're
You a
chasing.
roly poly? Yeah? Your big bag? So is it hot as fuck out in Texas?
Yes. I'm anemic and I'm like dying.
Girl, it reached like 109 here. I think 110 actually yesterday and it beat like a 50-year heat record. I feel like it's always hot in the summertime here
The
though.
fuck?
And I hate it. I've lived here my whole life. You think I'd get used to it, but I don't.
Is it one person or two up there?
One. Just threw me into the water and then my body glitched.
I'm coming.
Get up, Scooby. God damn. Thank you.
Almost had him.
I wasn't
Oh,
paying
he going for
attention.
the finish.
Oh crap! No, I don't
It's
go
two now.
there with them. On the guy over there. 19. Damn it.
My aim is
horrible.
so bad behind us.
Oh,
There's
behind
people
us.
going up there.
Beach.
Down one.
Beach. Sorry. I don't know if your kids are listening. I'm sorry.
Oh, I swear on them all the time. There's one over here. No, no.
Nobody's seen that.
I did.
Why are you spectating me like that?
Shooting me from the top.
Oh, lucky mother lover. Ow! Fuck.
You might want to move.
Yeah.
Oh, make it.
Gimme.
Whose sprite is this?
I don't know. Not mine. That's theirs. They dropped it.
Honestly, I'll take it.
You can take it, yeah.
I fell
There's
off
one
the
right
edge.
over there.
Oh my gosh. Somebody's coming around the corner.
I just fell off the edge.
I need help. Ah!
It's low. Low. Farm. Ooh, God.
Dodge.
Down one.
He just
Ah.
ran.
Invisible.
Rez. Ah! Dead.
Rez?
Oh, I didn't get to her in time. I got scaring her.
That's the same person. Too.
He just keeps coming around. I think he's trying to get his friend's Sprite back.
I did that to somebody the other day. They
Like that
they killed
campfire,
me.
heal your health up.
Oh,
Oh,
yeah,
Ooh,
that's-
he's
your-
got a
to your
gold
right,
duck
right here.
here. I don't have
Oh,
Oh.
lucky mother lover. Jesus. I can't believe I face planted. When I seen them my character getting up, I'm like, no way, that just happened. I was tapping A. I guess I was too,
We're at this gas station right here.
oh,
They
they just,
reboot now.
yeah, they res.
Somebody's rebooting. That's what's
I knocked him.
I'm low on AR ammo. Damn it. Just walked that out.
Beat their ass. Beat their ass. Yeah.
They got a hollow sprite on them if someone wants it. I'll go pick up your
Okay.
card.
Oh, be careful. They're coming around to the left. They're gonna be on the mountain. They're gonna be where you guys just dropped off.
Okay.
Just- I'd grab the
I don't know
reboot card
how the
and
hell you
then
be
go
seeing this.
over there.
And I'm running.
Run for your life. I have 20/20 vision. Surprisingly. Because I've been gaming since like 2009.
I bought my first Xbox. I was like 18.
I used to use my brother's Xbox.
Yeah, I used to go to a friend's house and play on their Xboxes, and then when I got my first job, I dropped my whole paycheck on it.
I love you guys.
360.
Appreciate
I have a med kit.
Now I want to go for my loot. Oh, he's coming back.
Oh, there's
I cracked
one
him, I
flying
cracked
in
him,
on
I
this
cracked
damn
him.
rock. On the top.
I got him, bitch. Sorry.
Noise.
That's the one. That's the one. Bro!
Is he still up top?
Nobody. Here you go.
There's a self-revive right there.
I'm 1 HP, don't even ask.
Here, I got a med kit.
I face planted again.
No
I just don't have
comment.
any shields. Pixie, do you want this med kit? You could be 100%.
Oh, sure, thanks.
You have ammo, Pixie?
On everything except for Master Rifle. Master Rifle, I only have 27 bullets left.
Okay, so we have to get AR ammo.
Extracting over here.
We go back to where we killed those people?
Go fuck with them.
Oh,
Hell yeah.
okay. Well, they want to go,
Crap.
they want to kill
Where?
these people,
I
and
wanna murder.
I only have a pistol. They're back here somewhere.
I don't see him.
They backed off.
Cracked him.
Oh,
God, fish. Fish.
They're here.
One more.
Where are you? Fuck. Got him.
they're so
Okay.
far away.
I'm thinking there's the.
They have anything good?
Well, they have a. No,
Not really.
not really.
Oh.
Oh, somebody got hit.
Hit me.
Yeah,
Ah.
he hit me.
Ouch. That hurt.
I'm gonna risk it. I'm gonna push him.
We can all push. Risk and push.
He's running like a bitch.
They res them again, the redskin guy. Oh my
He's
days.
up here.
I downed him
Resident Evil.
again.
Running away.
So horrible.
There's two teams fighting over here. They is knocking each other and everything.
Flying over there. I wanna kill two.
Ow, fuck.
Knock. Put shields on
Behind the car.
that guy.
Cracked one.
He's behind the tree right here.
They're going. I was they're going for it. They're going for a res.
He's
I
self
downed
ready.
one.
Himself. You
Well, so
bitch.
he only gonna come back with 33 health. I don't know what those bugs do.
Better.
It should be
He's around now.
you.
There you go.
You guys are amazing.
Oh, this is not helping.
Where are these teammates when I need
There's
them
a-
in pubs, man?
There's a purple gun right here.
Oops.
I prefer my pistol over that.
Bruh. I love these.
Oh, they're coming back.
Oh, on their hill?
God.
On the hill right here? By a,
I have no
some
long
heal.
range weapon.
There's some stuff over here.
I'm trying to get to it.
Maybe I might push him from the side.
Wanna try to flank?
Yeah, so it's from the left side.
Yeah, we can go that way.
We're getting shot at from the hill all the way over here too.
They're shooting from behind us.
Oh
too,
yeah,
right here.
that's their team.
I knocked one.
Where?
Hold up. Our team fighting back there.
Yep.
There's another team back here.
There's you. Come on, please.
That one?
rifle, I'll take it.
Who are you shooting at, Bull?
This thing. Nice.
I
Oh,
don't
we
know if
got
there's
here.
more. I
Ah.
just seen one over here.
Yeah, they
Well,
went
this
all
one
the way
here.
over there.
He was shooting at somebody though.
Oh, thought I wouldn't play Marvel.
From Threads. Gamers from Threads at 2 hearts energy. Strawberries 8.
I'm about to start this.
Oh, yeah, no, yeah.
Buy
I
an
wanna
extraction.
extract my maxed out sprite.
Oh, they extract both of these things.
He's emoting in the middle.
Me?
Yeah.
Using the duck sprite.
Oh, okay.
It's the only reason I use it.
Uh oh.
Oh, I'm getting
Crap,
shot
go
at
for
from
it.
the left.
Oh yeah, I saw.
Oh, they're on us. They're on us.
Where they at?
Don't think that was the only
Oh,
one coming.
They're shooting
Yeah,
from the
they're
hill.
coming from
Right,
the
right
hill.
here, this rock.
Oh, from the hill. It's that same team. Fucking big ass team. Oh, there's somebody on me. I know there was somebody on that fucking in that bush.
They just jumped on top of the building.
That bush don't deceive me.
Nice, mastered.
Where we going?
2 hearts energy. Lava Bunny. Me.
I'm sending it.
Back the shield. It should be low. Thank you. You see me right there?
On the bush.
On your left. By the rock. Oh, he fucked that up.
See? Yeah, he jumped into the tree.
I'm
This one will be a team.
gonna go finish him.
Yeah, let's go finish that.
Something off self. He's
Somebody's
he's
on
going
me.
to the van.
Somebody's on me.
Yeah, that's
Right
what
here? Oh, they
None
dipped
of
off. Back here.
I'm. Okay.
It's that same team from earlier.
The
They
pitfall
don't
over
get
there.
tired of this?
There's.
Yo, we gonna have to move.
There's a whole 3
They're
teams over there
shooting from
behind
the
us.
left right
Behind us.
here.
Behind us.
They're right here.
I think we're gonna have to push that team, to be honest.
They're on the left side. Yeah, they're right here.
Damn, they got me.
Got one. One has
What?
boots on. Knocked him.
They resin in the van.
Are you guys
There's a
One
whole
down
team
the
over
road.
there.
just?
A whole
We
nother
should just
team.
run. Get out of here.
He's down.
One more coming. I just heard the footsteps.
Trying to take out the fucking reboot van.
Come on, roll. Roll. Yeah. I ain't gonna make it, guy.
We go try. Dang.
Fuck this shit. I'm
I
out.
don't even know if I'm gonna make it, to be honest.
Nah, you can make it, but they're using the van to move. If y'all can, try to make it over here to the other one.
I'm getting shot at too. Yikes.
Yeah, I'm probably gonna die.
No, you got this. Damn.
Hungry ass.
Oh, they're shooting from that tower.
Oh, they're pushing. They're gonna be pushing now.
Ooh, that's a risky medkit right there. There's a small right in front of you.
Come on! Oh, what?
To your right.
Oh, fuck. I
Small
thought I
person
had.
right
I
there.
was shooting at
In
the
storm.
floor. Oh, they got you.
I was almost dead.
Oh no, I was shooting at the floor. I
That's
thought I
fine.
had an impulse grenade. Nice.
Oh, I didn't even think to use that. Whenever I do them though, I always fly backwards, so I don't like using them.
You going to the storm?
Yeah,
Yeah.
I die anyway.
Alright, let me go get some water.
That's a good game. Fish cool.
From threads. Gamers from threads are 2 hearts empty.
Okay. Nice. A blue one again?
We can go there, yeah.
Is it always blue?
No, it changes. I think it just was 2 in a row this time.
We got distracted by that one team that kept coming for us.
Yeah. They just leave us alone.
uh, uh, uh. We got a full team? Or maybe? Maybe bots or something?
Yeah, I see him. He's on this one's in that building.
No, that's not what we're doing. They tried it and they failed. There's somebody in this building? He just walked out the door?
You guys get it? Are there people on you?
Damn, they got me.
Got him. That was a real person, right? They're coming for me.
Wait, right behind you.
Yeah. Nice. We res you.
It looks like we're giving him a blessing. Ozzy.
Wait. Thank you for the sprites. Minis.
There's a gold one right here. Does anyone have this one? I already have it.
I have
It's a
this.
gold water
I
spray.
have this one.
Yeah, I already have the gold war sprite.
Okay. I like to extract them anyway because you still get dust for it. So no one wants else. The heels.
Which one is this one? Oh, down here.
Has everyone found a blue chest yet? I haven't found one. I need the heels.
Open up. Cool. another water one? Why do they keep giving me water one?
Is it a regular water?
Hollow?
Oh. It's Monday Madness right now, so like the rare ones are gonna be popping up a little bit more.
The same one. I want a different one.
I keep finding the same ones. I'm like, bruh, anyone I haven't found?
Alright. Anybody went up to the light tower yet?
No, but I'm close to that area. There's a chug jug right here.
Wow.
Always have heals on. Oh, the storm!
Ouch.
Always forget about the damn storm.
Noise.
Drop me.
Where the hero
Oh,
My first fight in over here.
Like if you guys see like a green hunting rifle, I'm down to pick that up. So
Okay,
I like
I'll look out for one.
I like sniping.
There's people down here.
Ow.
That one.
Oh, not gonna do it.
Down another one.
Noise.
You think got any sprites down there?
They look like bots.
No, baby.
I don't know if bots have Sprite.
Oh, thank you, honey.
Half pot here if anybody want to kill. Now I got another fuck one. Real people? Jesus. I don't know if they're real people. That hurt it. Ow.
One right here.
I feel like they're taking cover, but I don't know. Noise.
Bitch. Thank you, honey. Got what? How'd you get so many coins? Wow, that's amazing. Can I buy a parachute?
Where's zone gonna end? Maybe somewhere
They
we
need to
can-
bring the damn fishing spot back.
Oh yeah, I forgot. This is gonna be my last game because work tomorrow.
There's people right here.
Oof.
I
Somewhere
don't want to work
far
tomorrow.
left. Yeah, I don't want to either. Hopefully I'm
Down one.
nice.
One more on the other
Yeah,
side.
work at a warehouse.
Yeah, same.
Down.
Oh fudge. What the? I thought I had a shot an SMG. Anybody want to carry that?
I got one on me.
Down.
Points. Yeah, I work at a warehouse. It's not fun.
Yeah, I do shipping and receiving at a warehouse.
Same.
Really? That's
Yeah.
cool. Yeah, I work with my sister, so
You know,
she's either doing paperwork and wrapping, or I'll be wrapping so she'll do paperwork and wrap, and I mean I'll do the same, but we'll just trade off when we get bored, doing the same shit.
I work with my sister too.
What?
I swear.
That's crazy. We sell like pesticides and shit at the warehouse we work at.
Oh no, for us it's
We're like good at
our parts.
car parts. That's cool though.
Yeah, not until you have to carry them.
Yeah, I felt that. I used to work on the dock, so I used to have to move like transmissions and shit. That shit's heavy. I've docked one before and it I'm pretty sure I fucked it up.
I had a 300-pound pallet fall on my foot
Oh damn.
like a couple months ago.
But that didn't feel good.
No.
There's a
They
nice
still
rifle right
they
here.
still wanted me to go to work like that with the boot and everything. Like,
I'm like, bitch, these are hazardous conditions. I cannot work here.
I quit.
You pay for my new foot. Maybe I'll come back to work.
Thankfully it wasn't broken. It was just like swollen for like 2
Yeah.
2 weeks.
That's good though. Could have been worse, but
Uh-huh.
still sucks.
Well, I'm leaving soon, so I'm pretty happy. I'm pretty stoked about that.
Found another job?
Yeah, I'm just waiting for the application for that specific warehouse to open up, so just waiting.
Okay.
Yeah, it's for Best Buy.
That'd be cool.
Another warehouse, but not as much heavy lifting, like
Yeah.
car parts and stuff.
Mhm.
I have to lift like calipers, wheel hubs, wheel bearings, all that bullshit.
Jeez. That shit's not light.
Oh,
Above there.
noise. Real people? They came in?
Then that top is almost down.
Yeah, the one on top.
Yep.
Oh, they ran away. Scaredy cats. So there's like a bot
Down.
team and an actual team. I think that's a real team.
Okay.
Not sure.
This bitch. She,
Did the car.
right here.
Shoot the car.
Right here.
Go, come on. What is wrong with my aim right now?
I need to heal real fast. Thank you.
They're back here somewhere. Got him. You are
Nice.
not running away from us.
I'm gonna take this beating.
Got the ducky one. I don't. Yeah, sure. Boss Sprite. I'll take it. That was a team wipe.
I think so.
Noise. Wait.
There's a hunting rifle right here.
Look at that. I'm gonna drop minis for it.
The mega knees.
I need to get to an extraction. Was that us?
There's a duck. Purple. Yeah, it's just
Oh,
a
I
normal
knew
duck.
it. I knew it.
Please buy somebody back.
Yeah, the whole team.
Bought 2 people back.
Cracked them.
Yeah, there was only 9 left.
I'm gonna be on top of the hill. Be careful.
That looks like Trevor.
I'll take that.
Got one. I don't know why they were pickaxing me. Maybe they're trying to tell me like I don't have loot.
Mommy,
Trying to
Oh,
show you
right
that he's
over there.
friendly.
you want a dragon like that? Want it?
20, 26, 30, 39. Trying down if they're in.
Oh, what did I tell you?
If I wanted this dragon.
Easy.
It's like you better listen to me.
Go.
This one.
Just put it behind you.
They're
Oh,
all
see,
the
I
way-
always do it behind.
They're all the way to the right.
I'm supposed to throw it behind me. Oh, I always throw it in front of me and go back.
21.
Somebody's right here in front.
Makes a lot of sense.
Oh crap. I got a hunting rifle.
86. Pushing that. Got him. Woohoo!
Oh yeah. One other team.
Well, there are 6 people left. So
Wait,
I
there's
think,
one team.
I think it's us and 2 others.
2 other people. Yeah.
I'm gonna stay up.
I'm a little slow right now. Sorry.
Stay up on the hill.
Oh, they're in the car.
They're gonna try to reboot, I'm pretty sure. Or no. Kind of. Right here. One bush.
He's in the bush.
Down.
Yeah.
GG's. That was a good
GG's, guys.
ending
Yeah,
for
definitely.
me. Ooh. I don't know if you guys want to pick somebody up. Just message your group.
Oh, hello,
We
what
can
up?
play some trios.
Or that, yeah. It was nice playing with you guys, though.
Yeah, it was nice playing with you too.
I'll,
I hope you have a good night.
you too. I'll be on tomorrow for sure.
I should be too.
All right.
If you see me, just hit me an invite.
I got you. I'll message a group chat beforehand.
Okay.
Alrighty, bye.
I'm
Bye.
gonna
Good night.
use this character.
Alright, guys. I'm gonna get off now because I'm really, really, really tired. OMG, I gotta follow these people back. Oh, I followed them already. Alright, let me get off. Let me head off now. Bye.